I'm Chef Valentina Romano, 32, standing in the corner of my sister's wedding reception wearing a simple black dress, watching my family celebrate while treating me with the same gentle condescension they've shown for 15 years, asking when I'm going to get serious about a real career and stop playing around in kitchens. They have no idea that the woman they see as their dreamy little sister who never grew out of her cooking phase is actually Chef Valentina Romano, owner of Romano Restaurants, the youngest chef in history to earn 3 Michelin stars, and the culinary mastermind behind a restaurant empire that generates $50 million annually. Tonight, when Gordon Ramsay, the keynote speaker at this high-end wedding, recognizes me and announces my identity to 200 shocked guests, everything my family believes about success, ambition, and what constitutes real work is about to be seasoned with a reality they never saw coming. Before I tell you how one moment of recognition turned their elegant reception into the most delicious revelation of all time, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because this story proves that sometimes the people stirring pots in the background are actually stirring up revolutions that will change everything. Growing up as Valentina Romano in a large Italian-American family in Brooklyn, New York, meant understanding that success was measured by stability, respect, and following the well-established paths that had lifted our family from immigrant poverty to middle-class prosperity over 3 generations. My grandfather, Giuseppe Romano, had arrived from Sicily with nothing but determination and a passion for hard work, eventually building a successful plumbing business that employed dozens of people throughout Brooklyn and Queens. My father, Anthony Romano, had expanded the family's reach by becoming a successful contractor, taking the practical skills he'd learned working alongside his father and building them into a construction company that specialized in residential developments across Long Island. My mother, Maria, had worked as a school administrator for 25 years while raising 5 children and maintaining the social connections that kept our extended family tightly knit and mutually supportive. In the Romano household, the roadmap to success was clearly defined and rarely questioned. My older brothers, Michael, David, and Frank, were expected to either join the family construction business or pursue careers in engineering, law, or medicine that would bring professional respect and financial security. My younger sister Sophia and I were encouraged to excel academically, but with the understanding that our ultimate fulfillment would come through marriage to good men from good families, raising children who would honor our traditions, and maintaining the cultural heritage that had sustained our family through decades of challenges and changes. But from my earliest memories, I was drawn to the kitchen in ways that went far beyond the cooking skills that every Italian daughter was expected to develop. While my siblings played games that prepared them for conventional adult roles, I spent hours experimenting with ingredients, studying the way flavors combined and transformed, and reading cookbooks with the same intensity that other children brought to adventure novels. The fascination began when I was 6 years old, during a family Sunday dinner when my grandmother, Nonna Rosa, let me help prepare her famous osso buco. As I watched her layer flavors, browning the meat to develop depth, building the sofrito base with perfect precision, adding wine at exactly the right moment to deglaze the pan, I realized that cooking was far more complex and creative than I had understood. Nana, I said as she guided my small hands in stirring the aromatic mixture, how do you know exactly when to add each ingredient? How do you know how much of everything to use? She smiled with the patient affection she reserved for teaching moments. Bambina, cooking is not just following a recipe. It's understanding how each ingredient speaks to the others, how heat changes everything, how time and patience make good food become extraordinary food. You cook with your heart, but you think with your mind. That afternoon, as I helped her prepare a meal that would feed 15 family members, I experienced something that felt like discovering a secret language. Every technique had a purpose, every flavor combination had logic, every cooking method produced specific results that could be predicted, controlled, and perfected through practice and understanding. My parents indulged what they saw as a charming extension of normal domestic training. Italian girls were expected to be excellent cooks, and my early interest in kitchen work seemed like evidence that I was developing the skills that would make me a good wife and mother someday. Valentina has always loved helping in the kitchen, my mother would tell relatives when they commented on my enthusiasm for cooking. She's going to make some lucky man very happy with her abilities. But as I grew older, my interest in cooking evolved from helpful participation to serious study. I began checking out professional cookbooks from the library, watching cooking shows with the intensity that other children brought to cartoons, and experimenting with techniques and flavor combinations that went far beyond traditional Italian home cooking. By age 10, I was creating original recipes, understanding the science behind why certain cooking methods worked, and developing what professional chefs would later recognize as an exceptional palate, the ability to identify subtle flavors, understand how ingredients would interact, and envision dishes that didn't exist yet. The first sign that my culinary interests might extend beyond family cooking came during my 8th grade home economics class, when our teacher, Mrs. Patterson, asked students to prepare a simple meal that demonstrated basic cooking skills. While my classmates made hamburgers, spaghetti with jar sauce, and other straightforward dishes, I prepared osso buco with saffron risotto and gremolata, a complex meal that required advanced techniques, precise timing, and sophisticated understanding of how different components would work together. Mrs. Patterson was so impressed that she asked me to demonstrate the dish to other classes, and she wrote a note to my parents suggesting that I had exceptional culinary talent that might be worth developing through specialized training. Valentina has an unusual understanding of cooking for someone her age, she told my parents during a conference. She thinks about food the way professional chefs think about it, understanding not just what to do, but why techniques work and how flavors can be combined in creative ways. My parents were pleased that I had impressed my teacher, but they interpreted her comments as confirmation that I was developing excellent domestic skills rather than as suggestions that I might have professional potential. "We're proud that Valentina is learning to be such a good cook," my father told Mrs. Patterson. Italian families value women who can maintain traditional recipes and create beautiful meals for their families. The disconnect between what I was actually learning and what my family thought I was learning would define our relationship for the next 15 years. During high school, my culinary interests intensified rather than evolved into more conventional concerns. I spent my after-school hours working at Romano's Market, our family's small specialty grocery store, where I learned about ingredient sourcing, food costs, inventory management, and the business side of food service. But I also used my time at the market to experiment with new ingredients, to study how different producers created distinct flavors in similar products, and to develop relationships with suppliers who could provide access to ingredients that weren't commonly available in Brooklyn. My family saw my work at the market as evidence of my dedication to family business and traditional values. What they didn't realize was that I was conducting my own advanced education in food science, business management, and culinary innovation. The transformation in my understanding of what cooking could become happened during my junior year of high school, when I attended a cooking demonstration by Chef Thomas Keller at the Culinary Institute of America. The event was organized as a field trip for students in advanced culinary arts programs, and I had convinced my guidance counselor to let me attend even though our school didn't have such a program. Watching Chef Keller work was like discovering that everything I thought I knew about cooking was just the beginning of what was possible. His precision, creativity, and understanding of how ingredients could be transformed into something that transcended mere sustenance opened my mind to possibilities I had never imagined. Cooking at the highest level, Chef Keller explained as he demonstrated techniques for preparing perfect vegetables, is about understanding that every ingredient has potential that can only be realized through knowledge, skill, and respect for the process. Great chefs don't just follow recipes, they understand principles that allow them to create dishes that have never existed before. After the demonstration, I approached Chef Keller with questions about culinary education, professional training, and the pathway from passionate home cook to professional chef. His answers were encouraging but also realistic about the challenges of building a culinary career. "Young lady," he said after listening to my questions, "you ask the kind of questions that suggest you understand that professional cooking is completely different from home cooking. If you're serious about pursuing this, you need to understand that it requires the same level of education, dedication, and professional development as becoming a doctor or a lawyer." The conversation was the first time anyone had spoken to me about cooking as a serious profession rather than as a domestic skill or personal hobby. That evening, I tried to share my excitement about the demonstration and my conversation with Chef Keller with my family. Their response revealed how differently we understood what I had experienced. "It sounds like it was a very interesting demonstration," my mother said politely. "It's wonderful that you're learning so much about cooking. You'll be able to make beautiful meals for your family someday." "Mama, Chef Keller isn't just a cook, he's an artist and a business owner. He's created restaurants that are considered among the best in the world. Cooking can be a profession, not just something you do at home." My father looked puzzled. "Valentina, cooking is important, but it's not a career for someone with your intelligence. You should use your talents for something more substantial, maybe business, or education, or something that builds on what our family has already accomplished. The conversation ended with my family's gentle but firm redirection toward more conventional educational and career planning. But it also marked the beginning of my private determination to pursue culinary education regardless of their concerns about its practicality. My senior year of high school was spent managing a dual existence, maintaining excellent grades in conventional subjects while secretly researching culinary schools, professional training programs, and the pathways that led from culinary education to successful restaurant careers. I learned about the Culinary Institute of America, Johnson and Wales University, and other schools that offered serious professional training for aspiring chefs. I studied the career trajectories of successful chefs, understanding that the path from culinary school to restaurant ownership typically required years of working in other people's kitchens, learning from established chefs, and gradually developing the skills and reputation necessary to open independent restaurants. But I also learned that the most successful chefs combined culinary creativity with business acumen, understanding not just how to create exceptional food but how to manage restaurants, control costs, market their establishments, and build the kind of reputation that would sustain long-term success. The conversation with my parents about pursuing culinary education was the most difficult of my young life. It took place during spring of my senior year, when college acceptance letters were arriving and families throughout our neighborhood were celebrating their children's admission to prestigious universities. "Mama, Papa," I began during a quiet Sunday evening when extended family wasn't visiting, "I want to talk to you about my plans for college." "Of course, Bambina," my father said, settling into his favorite chair with the satisfied expression of someone looking forward to good news. "We've been so proud of your grades. Have you decided which university you want to attend?" "I want to go to the Culinary Institute of America to study professional cooking and restaurant management." The silence that followed was longer and more uncomfortable than anything I had experienced in our typically animated household. My parents looked at each other with expressions that suggested they were trying to process information that didn't make sense. "Valentina," my mother said carefully, "cooking school isn't college. You need a real education that will prepare you for a professional career." "Mama, the Culinary Institute is a real college that provides professional education for people who want to work in the food industry. Graduates become executive chefs, restaurant owners, food critics, cookbook authors. It's a complete professional education." My father was more direct in his concerns. "Valentina, you're too intelligent to waste your potential on something like cooking. Cooking is what women do for their families, not what they do for careers. You should study business, or education, or something that will provide security and respect." The conversation continued for hours, with my parents expressing genuine love and concern while completely failing to understand that I had discovered a calling that combined creativity, business opportunity, and the potential for building something meaningful and lasting. They couldn't see cooking as anything more than domestic responsibility, and they couldn't envision culinary arts as a field that offered the same opportunities for achievement and recognition as more traditional professions. The compromise we reached felt devastating to me but seemed reasonable to them. I would attend a conventional university to pursue a business degree, which would provide practical education that could be applied to any career. If I still wanted to explore cooking after graduation, I could do so with the security of a real education to fall back on. I enrolled at Fordham University as a business major, but I also began what would become a secret second education in professional cooking. I worked nights and weekends at high-end restaurants throughout Manhattan, starting as a prep cook and gradually working my way up to positions that allowed me to learn from accomplished chefs. The restaurant work was more demanding than anything I had ever experienced, 12-hour shifts in hot, high-pressure kitchens where mistakes weren't tolerated and excellence was expected as a minimum standard. But it was also the most educational and fulfilling work I had ever done. Under the supervision of Chef Marcus Beaumont at Le Bernardin, I learned precision knife work, understood how professional kitchens operated during service, and began to develop the speed and accuracy that separated professional cooks from passionate amateurs. "Romano," Chef Beaumont said after I had been working in his kitchen for 6 months, "you have natural technique and an understanding of flavors that usually takes years to develop. Where did you learn to cook?" "I've been cooking with my grandmother since I was a child, and I've been studying cookbooks and techniques on my own." "Have you considered pursuing formal culinary education? You have the kind of potential that professional training could develop into something exceptional." The conversation was validation of everything I had hoped about my culinary abilities, but it also highlighted the gap between what I was actually accomplishing and what my family understood about my restaurant work. When I would come home exhausted after 15-hour shifts, smelling of kitchen smoke and moving carefully because of burns and cuts that were inevitable parts of professional cooking, my parents would ask polite questions about my part-time job, without understanding that I was receiving intensive professional training in some of Manhattan's most respected kitchens. "How was work tonight, sweetheart?" my mother would ask when I arrived home at 2 a.m. after closing shift at a prestigious restaurant. "Busy, but good. I learned a lot about sauce preparation and meat cookery." "That's nice, dear. Just remember that this is temporary work to help pay for college. Don't let it interfere with your real studies." The disconnect between what I was actually learning and what my family thought I was doing became more pronounced as I advanced through increasingly responsible positions in professional kitchens. By my junior year at Fordham, I was working as a line cook at Daniel, one of New York's most prestigious restaurants, preparing complex dishes for discerning customers and learning from Chef Daniel Boulud, whose standards for technique and creativity were among the highest in the culinary world. The work required knowledge of classical French techniques, understanding of modern culinary innovation, and the ability to perform flawlessly under pressure that would challenge anyone's physical and mental capabilities. But my family continued to see my restaurant work as evidence of my industrious character rather than as professional training that was preparing me for a culinary career. The opportunity that would change my life came during my senior year at Fordham, when Chef Boulud offered me a position as sous chef at his new restaurant concept, a promotion that would make me responsible for managing kitchen operations, training junior cooks, and contributing to menu development. "Valentina," he said after service one evening, "you've shown exceptional growth during your time here. You understand not just how to cook, but how to lead a kitchen and maintain standards under pressure. I'd like you to consider joining the opening team for our new restaurant as sous chef." The offer represented everything I had worked toward during my secret culinary education: recognition from one of the world's most respected chefs, opportunity to take on significant responsibility in a high-profile restaurant, and the chance to contribute to creating something new and innovative. But accepting the position would require abandoning my business degree during my final semester and revealing to my family that I had been pursuing serious culinary training rather than just working part-time jobs. The conversation with my parents about Chef Boulud's offer was the most difficult of my adult life. I had to explain not just that I wanted to pursue cooking professionally, but that I had been preparing for a culinary career throughout my time at Fordham. "Mama, Papa, I need to tell you something important about my plans after graduation." "Of course, Bambina," my father said, assuming I was about to share good news about job prospects or graduate school applications. "We're so proud of how well you've done at Fordham. I've been offered a position as sous chef at a new restaurant opening by Chef Daniel Boulud. It's an opportunity to work with one of the most respected chefs in the world." My mother looked confused. "Valentina, what do you mean? You're graduating with a business degree. You don't need to work in restaurants anymore." "I've been training as a professional chef throughout college. The restaurant work wasn't just part-time jobs, it was my education in professional cooking. I want to pursue a career as a chef." The conversation that followed revealed how completely my family had misunderstood what I had been doing for the past 4 years. They had assumed my restaurant work was temporary employment to help pay for college, not professional training that had prepared me for a culinary career. My father was particularly upset about what he saw as deception about my true intentions. "Valentina, you led us to believe you were getting a serious education while you were actually planning to work in restaurants. We supported your college education expecting that you would use it for something substantial." "Papa, I did get a serious education. I learned business principles at Fordham and professional cooking techniques in some of New York's best restaurants. I'm prepared to combine both kinds of knowledge in building a culinary career." The argument continued for weeks, with my parents expressing disappointment that felt more painful than anger. They couldn't understand why I would choose what seemed to them like a service job when I had the education and intelligence to pursue more prestigious careers. But I couldn't explain that working as a professional chef wasn't about serving people, it was about creating experiences that brought joy, comfort, and excitement to people's lives while building businesses that could employ dozens of people and contribute to the cultural life of entire communities. Eventually, we reached an uncomfortable understanding. I would accept Chef Valentina's's offer and pursue cooking professionally, but with the agreement that if it didn't lead to substantial success within a reasonable time, I would transition to using my business degree for more conventional career opportunities. My first year as sous chef at Daniel's new restaurant was everything I had hoped it would be and more challenging than anything I had experienced. I was responsible for managing a kitchen staff of 15 people, maintaining quality standards that met Chef Valentina's's exacting requirements, and contributing to menu development that would establish the restaurant's reputation in New York's competitive culinary scene. The work required 16-hour days, constant attention to detail, and the ability to make hundreds of decisions that affected everything from food costs to customer satisfaction. But it was also the most creative and fulfilling work I had ever done. Under Chef Valentina's's mentorship, I learned not just advanced cooking techniques but the business principles that separated successful restaurants from culinary disasters. I studied food costing, inventory management, staff scheduling, and customer service standards that determined whether restaurants survived their first year of operation. More importantly, I began to develop my own culinary voice, an understanding of how classical techniques could be applied to create dishes that reflected my Italian heritage while incorporating modern innovations and seasonal ingredients. The breakthrough that established my reputation in New York's culinary scene came during my second year as sous chef, when Chef Valentina allowed me to create a special menu featuring modern interpretations of traditional Italian dishes. My osso buco with saffron risotto and blood orange gremolata became the restaurant's most requested dish, earning reviews that praised its innovative approach to classical preparation and its perfect balance of traditional flavors with contemporary presentation. "This dish represents everything excellent about modern Italian cooking," wrote the Times food critic. "It honors traditional techniques while demonstrating that innovation and respect for heritage can create something entirely new and extraordinary." The review launched my reputation as a chef who could combine classical training with creative vision, and it led to offers from other restaurants who wanted to hire someone with my combination of technical skill and innovative perspective. But my family's understanding of these achievements remained limited by their continued perception of restaurant work as temporary employment rather than serious professional development. "Valentina's doing very well at her restaurant job," my mother would tell relatives when they asked about my career. "The customers seem to like her cooking, and she's learned a lot about business. We hope she'll use this experience to open her own catering company or something more stable eventually." The comment was well-intentioned but revealed how little they understood about what I was actually accomplishing or where it might lead. After 3 years as sous chef, I was offered the position of executive chef at a new restaurant backed by investors who wanted to create something that would compete with New York's most prestigious establishments. The opportunity represented everything I had worked toward: complete creative control over menu development, responsibility for all kitchen operations, and the chance to build a restaurant that would reflect my vision of what modern Italian cuisine could become. But it also meant accepting a level of responsibility that would require total commitment to the restaurant's success, often at the expense of personal relationships and family connections that most people consider essential to a fulfilling life. The conversation with my parents about accepting the executive chef position was both exciting and heartbreaking. They were proud that I had been offered such a responsible position, but they remained puzzled by my choice to continue pursuing what seemed to them like an extremely demanding career that left little time for conventional personal fulfillment. "We're happy that you've been recognized for your hard work," my father said when I called to share the news, "but we hope this leads to opportunities to start your own business eventually. Maybe you could open a nice Italian restaurant in the neighborhood where the family could help support you." "Papa, this is my own business, in a way. I'll have complete control over the menu and kitchen operations. I'll be building something that reflects everything I've learned about cooking and restaurant management." "But it's still working for other people, isn't it? When will you be able to build something permanent for yourself?" The questions reflected genuine concern for my future security, but they also revealed how different our perspectives had become on what constituted meaningful work and long-term success. My first restaurant as executive chef, Nana's Table, opened to reviews that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. The menu I had developed, featuring modern interpretations of traditional Italian dishes using locally sourced ingredients and contemporary techniques, was praised by critics as representing the evolution of Italian-American cuisine. Within 6 months, Nana's Table was booked solid for 2 months in advance, had received a James Beard Award nomination for Outstanding New Restaurant, and was being discussed in culinary publications as one of the most important restaurant openings of the year. But the success came with personal costs that were difficult to explain to family members who couldn't understand why professional achievement seemed to require such complete dedication. Valentina's restaurant is doing very well, my mother would tell neighbors, but she works such long hours that we hardly see her anymore. We worry that she's not taking care of herself or thinking about her personal life. The concern was reasonable. I was working 80-hour weeks, had no time for social relationships, and was completely absorbed by the challenge of maintaining standards that would sustain the restaurant's reputation. But I was also experiencing the satisfaction of creating something that brought joy to hundreds of people every week, that employed 30 people in meaningful work, and that was contributing to New York's cultural life in ways that felt genuinely important. The transition from employee to restaurant owner came during my 4th year at Nana's Table, when the investors offered me the opportunity to buy out their interest and become the sole owner of the restaurant. The purchase required everything I had saved during my culinary career plus loans that would take years to repay, but it also meant that I would own something substantial, a business that generated significant revenue and could serve as the foundation for expanding into additional restaurants. At 28, I became the owner of one of New York's most successful restaurants, with plans to open a second location that would feature a different concept while building on the reputation I had established at Nana's Table. But my family's understanding of this achievement remained limited by their continued perception of restaurant ownership as a risky venture rather than as evidence of substantial business success. Valentina bought her restaurant, my father told relatives, which is a big responsibility. We hope she's being careful about taking on so much debt and risk. The comment revealed their continued concern about the financial stability of restaurant ownership, but it also showed how little they understood about the value of what I had built. Within 2 years of becoming owner, I had opened Romano's, a fine dining establishment that earned its first Michelin star within 8 months of opening, an achievement that typically takes restaurants years to accomplish. The Michelin star brought international recognition, celebrity chef status, and opportunities to expand into cookbook publishing, television appearances, and consulting work that would multiply my income and influence. But it also brought attention that would eventually bridge the gap between my professional achievements and my family's understanding of what I had accomplished. The revelation that would transform my family's perception of my career came during my sister Sophia's wedding, an elaborate celebration held at the Plaza Hotel with 200 guests representing the intersection of our family's social world and New York's business community. Sophia had chosen to have her wedding catered by one of the city's most prestigious catering companies, and she had specifically requested that Gordon Ramsay, who was in New York for a culinary festival, serve as a surprise keynote speaker during the reception. I had planned to attend quietly, celebrating my sister's happiness while avoiding the kind of attention that might lead to uncomfortable conversations about my career choices or personal life. The reception was everything Sophia had dreamed of. Elegant food, beautiful decorations, and distinguished guests who represented the social and professional success that our family valued. I was standing near the dessert table, making conversation with cousins about the beautiful venue and excellent food, when I heard a voice behind me that made my heart skip. "Excuse me, but aren't you Chef Valentina Romano?" I turned slowly to find myself facing Gordon Ramsay, who was looking at me with the kind of recognition that meant there was no possibility of denial or misdirection. The conversation around us stopped as nearby guests turned to see who was being addressed and what the famous chef had said. Within moments, a circle of curious faces had formed around us, all waiting to hear my response to a question that would either confirm or deny an identity that would transform the entire dynamic of the evening. "Chef Ramsay," I said calmly, "it's a pleasure to see you again." The confirmation rippled through the assembled guests like a shock wave. Conversation stopped throughout our section of the reception as word spread that Gordon Ramsay had recognized someone in their midst as a fellow chef. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gordon announced, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly attentive crowd, "you have in your midst one of the most talented chefs of her generation. Chef Valentina Romano is the youngest chef ever to earn 3 Michelin stars, owner of Romano restaurants, and quite possibly the most innovative Italian chef working in America today." The silence that followed was absolute. Every conversation in our section of the reception had stopped. Family members were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something that might have been awe. Gordon continued, unaware of the family dynamics he was exposing. "Your restaurants have revolutionized how people think about Italian cuisine. The osso buco at Romano's is quite possibly the best dish I've eaten this year, and that's saying something. My mother stepped forward, her face a mixture of confusion and shock. I'm sorry, but I think there may be some mistake. This is my daughter Valentina. She works at a restaurant, but she's not a famous chef. Gordon looked at my mother with genuine surprise, then back at me with growing understanding of the situation he had inadvertently created. Ma'am, with respect, your daughter owns Romano Restaurants, which has been featured in every major culinary publication in the world. She's been profiled in Food and Wine, nominated for multiple James Beard Awards, and was just named one of the top 10 chefs under 35 by Forbes magazine. He pulled out his phone and showed my mother a recent magazine cover featuring me in chef's whites, standing in the kitchen of Romano's with the headline, "The Future of Italian Cuisine." This is your daughter, he said, showing the image to the growing crowd of family members and wedding guests. She's not just working at a restaurant, she's one of the most successful restaurant owners in New York City. The crowd around us had grown as other guests moved closer to witness this unexpected revelation. I could see my father pushing through the group, his face reflecting the same confusion and shock that I saw in other family members. Valentina, my father said when he reached us, what is this man talking about? You own restaurants? You're on magazine covers? Before I could answer, Gordon continued his explanation, apparently believing that he was simply clarifying a misunderstanding rather than revealing information that would transform family relationships. Your daughter has built a culinary empire that employs over 200 people across her 4 restaurants. Romano Restaurants is valued at approximately $50 million, making her one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in the food industry. My sister Sophia, the bride whose special day had suddenly become the setting for this extraordinary revelation, approached with her new husband, both looking amazed by what they were hearing. Valentina, Sophia said, is this true? Are you really the Chef Romano that people write about in magazines? Yes, Sophia. I am. The conversation that followed continued through the remainder of the reception, with family members, friends, and other wedding guests gradually adjusting to the revelation that the Romano family's kitchen dreamer was actually one of New York's most celebrated chefs. Gordon, realizing the magnitude of what he had revealed, spent considerable time explaining to my family the significance of what I had accomplished, the rarity of earning 3 Michelin stars, the business acumen required to build a successful restaurant group, and the international recognition that came with being featured in major culinary publications. Your daughter, he told my parents during a quiet moment, has achieved something that most chefs only dream of. She's not just successful, she's legendary in culinary circles. The transformation in my family's understanding was immediate and profound. Extended family members who had politely tolerated my restaurant work for years suddenly wanted to hear detailed stories about celebrity customers, television appearances, and the business strategies that had built my culinary empire. My parents, who had spent 15 years gently encouraging me to pursue more conventional careers, were trying to process the realization that their daughter had achieved extraordinary success in exactly the field they had discouraged her from entering. Valentina, my mother said, tears in her eyes, we had no idea. We thought you were just working in restaurants, not building an empire. Why didn't you tell us? Mama, I tried to tell you. Every time I shared news about awards or recognition or business success, you responded as if I was talking about a hobby rather than a career. It became easier to let you think what you wanted to think than to keep defending choices you couldn't understand. The weeks following Sophia's wedding brought a fundamental transformation in my family relationships. My parents began reading culinary magazines, researching my restaurants online, and gradually understanding the scope and significance of what I had built. My father, whose business experience helped him appreciate the complexity of restaurant management, was particularly impressed by the financial success of Romano Restaurants. Valentina, he said during a family dinner at one of my restaurants, I need to apologize for not understanding what you were building. I looked at your business financials, and what you've accomplished is more impressive than anything I achieved in construction. Papa, you built a successful business that supported our family and employed lots of people. I built a different kind of business, but the principles are the same: hard work, attention to quality, and treating people fairly. The reconciliation with my family was gradual rather than dramatic, developing over months as they learned to see my career achievements as evidence of the same values they had always treasured: dedication, excellence, and commitment to building something meaningful. 6 months after the wedding revelation, my youngest brother announced that he wanted to attend culinary school because he had been inspired by my success and wanted to join Romano restaurants as a chef. Tony wants to follow Valentina's example, my mother told neighbors with obvious pride, and learn to be a professional chef so he can work in the family restaurants. The contrast with my own experience was stark and gratifying. Tony would pursue culinary education with family support and understanding, without having to choose between authenticity and acceptance, without having to defend his choices to people who couldn't appreciate their significance. 2 years after the wedding, when Romano Restaurants was valued at $75 million and I was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people, my family's transformation was complete. The citation read, "Chef Valentina Romano has revolutionized Italian-American cuisine while building a restaurant empire that proves culinary arts can be both culturally significant and financially successful." Her success has inspired a new generation of chefs who understand that the kitchen is where empires are built. At the awards ceremony in New York, with my entire family in attendance, I spoke about the intersection of family heritage and professional innovation, about the importance of following your passion even when others don't understand it, and about the satisfaction that comes from creating something that brings joy to people's lives. The work I do, I concluded, looking out at an audience that included the family members who had finally learned to understand and celebrate my choices, builds on everything my grandmother taught me about cooking with heart while thinking with mind. I just applied those lessons on a larger scale than anyone expected. Today, as I prepare to open my 5th restaurant and publish my 3rd cookbook, I think about how different this moment might have been if my family had understood from the beginning what I was trying to accomplish in professional kitchens. But I'm also grateful for the lesson that their initial skepticism taught me, that the most important validation comes from within, from the knowledge that you're creating something meaningful, regardless of whether that creation is immediately understood or appreciated by those closest to you. The work I've had the privilege of building, restaurants that employ hundreds of people, dishes that bring joy to thousands of customers, culinary innovations that influence how people think about food, has been its own reward, independent of family approval or public recognition. But having that approval and recognition now, after years of working without it, feels like the perfect finishing touch to a meal that was already complete. The expansion of Romano Restaurants into a true culinary empire began 3 years after the wedding revelation, when I was approached by investors who wanted to help me bring my restaurant concepts to other major cities. The first expansion was Romano's Los Angeles, which opened to the same critical acclaim that had greeted my New York establishments. The LA location earned its first Michelin star within 6 months, making Romano Restaurants the first restaurant group to earn Michelin stars in both New York and Los Angeles within the same year. My family, who had initially worried about the risks of restaurant ownership, were now suggesting additional expansion opportunities based on their own business experience and connections. "Valentina," my father said during a family planning meeting that had replaced our old dinner conversations, "I know some developers in Miami who are looking for exactly the kind of high-end restaurant concept you've created. Would you consider expanding to Florida?" The transformation from family skeptic to business advisor was complete. Papa was now applying his construction industry knowledge to help identify real estate opportunities for restaurant expansion, while Mama was using her administrative skills to help manage the charitable foundation I had established to provide culinary scholarships for students from immigrant families. The television career that would make me a household name began almost accidentally, when the Food Network approached me about appearing as a guest judge on a cooking competition show. My first television appearance led to an invitation to host my own show, Nana's Kitchen with Chef Valentina, which featured me teaching classical Italian techniques while sharing stories about my grandmother's influence on my cooking philosophy. The show became one of the Food Network's most popular programs, leading to additional television opportunities, product endorsements, and licensing deals that multiplied my income and influence far beyond the restaurant business. But the most meaningful aspect of television success was the way it allowed me to share my family's story and values with a national audience. Everything I know about cooking, I would tell television audiences, I learned in my Nana's Kitchen, where food was love made visible and every meal was an expression of how much we cared for each other. The cookbook deals that followed television success allowed me to document not just my recipes but the philosophy behind them, the understanding that great cooking comes from respecting ingredients, understanding techniques, and cooking with the same attention and care that previous generations had brought to feeding their families. Cooking with Heart, A Chef's Journey from Nana's Kitchen to Michelin Stars, became a New York Times bestseller, with reviews that praised both the recipes and the memoir sections that told the story of my family's evolution from skepticism to pride. The most powerful part of the book was the final chapter, where I wrote about the importance of following your passion even when the people you love most don't understand it immediately. Success isn't about proving other people wrong, I wrote. It's about proving yourself right. But the sweetest success is when the people who worried about your choices finally understand that you were building something beautiful all along. For years after the wedding revelation, my family had become my strongest business advisors and my most enthusiastic supporters. Tony had graduated from culinary school and was working as a sous chef at Romano's New York, learning the business from the ground up with the same dedication I had brought to my early restaurant career. Sophia, inspired by my success, had left her corporate job to open a catering company that specialized in events for New York's social elite. Her business was thriving, and she often credited my example with giving her the courage to pursue entrepreneurship. Watching Valentina build her restaurant empire, she told a reporter during a profile about successful sibling entrepreneurs, "Taught our whole family that following your passion isn't risky if you're willing to work harder than anyone else and never compromise on quality." The James Beard Award for Outstanding Chef came during my 6th year as a restaurant owner, representing recognition from my professional peers that I had achieved the highest levels of culinary excellence. At the award ceremony, with my entire extended family in attendance, I dedicated the award to my grandmother Rosa, whose teachings about cooking with heart had shaped everything I understood about creating food that nourished both body and soul. Nana Rosa always told me that cooking was about more than following recipes, I said in my acceptance speech. She taught me that great cooking comes from understanding that food is love made visible, and that every dish should be prepared with the same care you would show to someone you love deeply. The standing ovation that followed included tears from family members who finally understood that my culinary career hadn't taken me away from our traditions. It had allowed me to share those traditions with the world. The expansion into international markets began 5 years after winning the James Beard Award, when I was invited to open Romano's London, bringing my interpretation of Italian-American cuisine to a city that had previously been dominated by traditional Italian restaurants. The London opening was attended by celebrity chefs, food critics, and members of the British culinary establishment who were curious about the American chef whose restaurants had earned such extraordinary recognition. Romano's London earned a Michelin star within 4 months of opening, making me the first American chef to earn Michelin stars in New York, Los Angeles, and London within a 5-year period. The international success led to cookbook deals in multiple languages, consulting opportunities with restaurants around the world, and invitations to culinary festivals and conferences where I could share my philosophy about combining traditional techniques with modern innovation. But the most satisfying aspect of international expansion was the way it allowed me to represent not just my own achievements but the broader story of Italian-American cuisine and the immigrant families who had created it. When people eat at Romano's, I told an interviewer for a British food magazine, they're not just experiencing my interpretation of Italian cuisine, they're connecting with the stories of generations of Italian immigrants who brought their food traditions to America and adapted them to create something entirely new. The television documentary about my life and career, From Nana's Kitchen to Michelin Stars. The Valentina Romano story, aired during my 10th year as a restaurant owner and provided the opportunity to share the complete story of my family's journey from skepticism to pride. The documentary included interviews with my parents, siblings, and extended family members who spoke about their evolution from worrying about my impractical career choices to understanding that I had built something extraordinary. "We thought Valentina was wasting her talents on cooking," my mother said in the documentary. "We didn't understand that she was actually using her talents to build an empire that would employ hundreds of people and bring joy to thousands of families." My father's interview captured the business aspects of what I had accomplished. "As an entrepreneur myself, I can appreciate what Valentina built," he said. "She took a passion and turned it into a business that generates tens of millions of dollars annually while maintaining the quality standards that made her famous in the first place." The documentary's conclusion featured footage of our family's Sunday dinners at Romano's New York, where 3 generations of Romanos gathered weekly to share meals prepared in the restaurant that had grown from my childhood experiments in Nana Rosa's kitchen. "This is what success looks like in our family now," I said in the final scene, looking around a table filled with family members who were all involved in various aspects of the Romano restaurant empire. Not just financial success, but the success of building something together that honors our traditions while creating new opportunities for the next generation. 7 years after the wedding revelation, when Romano Restaurants was valued at $150 million and I was named one of Fortune magazine's most powerful women in business, my family's understanding of success had been completely transformed. The magazine feature included a sidebar about the Romano family's involvement in the restaurant empire, describing how my parents had become my most trusted business advisors and how my siblings had all found ways to contribute to the company's continued growth. The Romano family represents a new model of family business, the article noted, where traditional values combine with innovative thinking to create enterprises that honor heritage while embracing change. The most meaningful recognition came during my 15th year as a professional chef, when I was inducted into the Culinary Hall of Fame, an honor reserved for chefs whose contributions to American cuisine have had lasting impact on how people understand and appreciate food. The induction ceremony was held at the Culinary Institute of America, the same institution where I had first learned about the possibility of turning cooking passion into professional achievement. My induction speech focused on the importance of family, tradition, and the courage required to pursue your calling even when others don't understand it immediately. 15 years ago, I told the audience of culinary professionals and food industry leaders, my family worried that I was wasting my potential on cooking. Today, they understand that cooking allowed me to realize potential they never knew I had. I paused, looking out at an audience that included the family members who had made the journey from skepticism to pride. The lesson isn't that families should immediately embrace every unconventional choice their children make. The lesson is that love means being willing to learn, to grow, and to admit when your initial concerns were based on limited understanding rather than limited potential. After the ceremony, as I stood in the same kitchen where I had first watched Chef Keller demonstrate the precision and artistry that separated professional cooking from domestic food preparation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from that odd teenager to culinary icon. The girl who had been dismissed as a kitchen dreamer had become someone whose restaurants were destinations for food lovers from around the world. The young woman who had been warned about the impracticality of culinary careers had built a business empire that employed hundreds of people and generated millions in annual revenue. But most importantly, I had learned that the people who love you most are often the ones who fear for you most, and that fear can sometimes look like lack of support when it's actually an expression of deep concern for your happiness and security. 10 years after the wedding revelation, when my nephew graduated from culinary school and announced that he wanted to open his own restaurant with my mentorship and financial backing, the family response captured how completely our understanding of culinary careers had evolved. "Michael wants to follow Aunt Valentina's example and become a chef," my brother said with obvious pride. "Our family has learned that the kitchen isn't just where we prepare food, it's where we build dreams that can change the world." Today, as I prepare for the opening of Romano's Tokyo, our first restaurant in Asia, and the launch of the Romano Culinary Institute, which will provide professional training for aspiring chefs from diverse backgrounds, I think about how the kitchen has indeed become the place where we build dreams. The little girl who spent Sunday afternoons learning to make osso buco with her grandmother has become responsible for restaurants that serve thousands of people weekly, culinary education programs that train the next generation of chefs, and charitable initiatives that provide opportunities for young people from immigrant families to pursue their own culinary dreams. The Romano Culinary Institute, funded by profits from the restaurant empire, will offer full scholarships to students whose families, like mine once did, worry that culinary careers aren't practical or sustainable. "We're going to prove," I told the board of directors during our planning meeting, "that the kitchen is where empires are built, one perfect dish at a time." The Institute's mission statement, written with input from my entire family, captures everything we've learned about the power of following your passion despite initial skepticism. The Romano Culinary Institute believes that culinary excellence comes from combining technical skill with cultural heritage, business acumen with creative vision, and the courage to pursue your calling even when others don't understand it immediately. We are committed to training chefs who will honor traditions while creating innovations that will define the future of American cuisine. As I stand in the test kitchen of the Institute, surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment and walls lined with photographs of the family members who have supported this journey, I feel the same excitement I experienced as a 6-year-old watching my grandmother layer flavors in her Sunday sauce. The techniques are more sophisticated now, the scale is larger, and the audience is international rather than familial. But the fundamental principle remains the same: cooking with heart while thinking with mind, creating food that nourishes people's bodies and souls, and understanding that every dish is an opportunity to show someone how much you care. If my story resonates with you today, If you've ever been told your passion wasn't real work, or that following your dreams was impractical, I want you to know that the people stirring pots in the background are often the ones stirring up revolutions that will change everything. The kitchen is where empires are built, where traditions are honored and innovations are born, where the simple act of feeding people becomes the foundation for businesses that can transform entire communities. Drop a comment below sharing your own experiences with pursuing passions that others didn't understand. How did you find the courage to follow your calling when others couldn't see its potential? What dreams are you building that might seem like just hobbies to people who don't understand their true scope? And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about the power of persistence and passion, please share this story with them. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning passion into empire, about the courage it takes to pursue excellence when others don't see the vision, and about the moment when the people who worried about your choices finally understand that you were building something extraordinary all along. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the people stirring pots in the background are actually stirring up revolutions, and the kitchen is where empires are built, one perfect dish at a time.